For Spokane, Coeur d'Alene, and the inland Northwest. This is the Emmy Award-winning KXLY News 4 at 5.
Tension builds in the North Idaho town of Dixie, where self-avowed radical environmentalists face off with the U.S. Forest Service. Good afternoon. Rob Doherty and Karen Kelly have the night off. In the small summer vacation town of Dixie, residents there fear that bloodshed may be coming.
For 3 months now, members of an environmental group called Earth First have been camping near Dixie. They say they've been engaging in acts of civil disobedience to try to stop roads from being built in one of the largest unspoiled temperate forests in the world. But many people who live in the area say Earth First has been going too far. Jeff Ray has more on why Earth First has chosen Dixie to make its stand.
Signs of conflict are everywhere in the tiny north-central Idaho town of Dixie. This summer, members of a self-avowed radical environmental group have been staging protests near here to try to stop road construction in the so-called Mallard Cove area.
This is the largest roadless temperate forest wilderness existing.
Earth First member Sarah Seed says when the Forest Service builds a logging road, a barrier is created that animals like wolves and bears will not cross.
When you put in the road, you take out the bridge. There's no bridge for the populations to cross over to breed. So what you get is either a population that's wiped out by natural disaster or a population that inbreeds. And inbreeding in animals is no different than inbreeding in humans.
But just the talk about the Earth First protest is said to be destroying the tourist-based economy of the town of Dixie. One cafe owner we talked with, Jim Miller, says he figures his business is down at least 70%. He says people have apparently been hearing about the protests and they're afraid to show up. He believes visitors have nothing to worry about. The Forest Service is suggesting that Earth First is responsible for spiking trees in the Dixie area. The group denies it. They say the spiking is being done perhaps to discredit their movement or perhaps by a sympathizer who is not abiding by their desire for nonviolent protests.
You know, Jeff, with summer drawing to a close, wouldn't Earth First members be moving on?
Well, they say they're in for the long haul. While we were visiting their camp, they were chopping wood and getting ready for the winter. They say they'll have 6 to 8 people there this winter maintaining their efforts.
Okay, I'm sure a story that's not over. Thank you. Jeff Ray reporting. An update tonight on the News 4's investigation crisis on the Columbia. Health officials say preliminary studies support concerns about a higher than normal rate of illness in the Northport area near the Canadian border. At a public meeting last night, health officials told residents that new studies have found unusually high levels of lead and arsenic around Northport. Investigators say they're planning more tests. Next month, they'll be checking grade school-aged children in the Northport area for exposure to lead.
A second shooting in as many days at an abortion protester report, this time in Kansas. A doctor was shot outside a Wichita abortion clinic yesterday. Dr. George Tiller was hit in both arms, and officials say he is going to be all right. Last night, police arrested Michelle Shannon of Grants Pass, Oregon, in connection with the shooting. She is charged with attempted murder.
President Clinton is catching on to the concept of a real vacation. The first family is in Martha's Vineyard on its first extended vacation in 4 years. White House spokeswoman Dee Dee Myers says the president actually slept in this morning and didn't even come out of the house until about 10 o'clock. He also spent some time reading the newspaper on the porch. Sounds like a great way to start off a vacation. I understand that the family's made no formal plans for the vacation. Yeah, like the rest of us, they're kind of at the mercy of what the weather is going to be like.
Trying to learn to lighten up a little bit. But there's a little bit different note here. Like a lot of Americans, we sometimes get dinner vacations and dinner invitations, I should say. Well, they've gotten invitations from, here's the list, the Washington Post, Jackie Onassis, things like that.
Oh, gee, how do you choose?
Different crowd, I think.
Okay. Just ahead on News 4, people who suffer from polio years ago are now facing another disabling illness. We'll have an update on Family Health Beat.
And coming up a bit later in our 5:30 difference, the Federal Aviation Administration says the Navy pilot who hit a crop duster over the Palouse is responsible for the accident. We'll have a full report.
News 4 continues with Marianne Mishima and Family Health Beat.
In Family Health Beat tonight, people who triumphed over polio decades ago are now facing another threat. It's called post-polio syndrome, a set of symptoms that strike unexpectedly and can leave a person totally debilitated. In fact, those striving for the pinnacle of fitness may be at greatest risk of losing it all. Charmin Collins looks healthy, vital. No one would know that post-polio syndrome has robbed her of an active and athletic life. It's been devastating.
And it goes way beyond physical activity. You know, first there's an initial shock of losing that physical activity, but then I've lost so much more than that because I can no longer take care of my family.
About 10 years ago, Charmin started an intense exercise program.
I was working out probably 2 hours a day and very rarely took a day off.
She fine-tuned every muscle in her body, ignoring the early signs, severe back pain, muscle cramps, then muscle atrophy. She brushed off suggestions she had post-polio and pushed through the pain.
I kept saying to myself, oh, I had too light a case of polio. This, you know, besides that, if I have PPS, all it will mean is I won't be able to ride my bike as fast up Pettit Drive.
That denial ended several months later.
There was a time between January and April of '91, I was first diagnosed in January, that I lost probably 90% of my overall body muscle strength. Okay.
The treatment for post-polio is to conserve energy, so Charmin uses a scooter to move around her large house. Bit by bit, she's losing the ability to function.
I can't do the laundry anymore because I can't lift the laundry from when it's wet from the washer to the dryer. And I can't fold clothes because I can't hold my arms up long enough, you know, to fold clothes. And I can't cook.
Every muscle she overused is now deteriorating. She can no longer play the piano, knit, or type. Today, she spends time reading.
In the last 6 months, I've lost a lot of ability in my, you know, strength in my diaphragm. So now I'm using a ventilator at night. And, you know, I really used my diaphragm a lot.
Experts say nearly every person who's had polio faces some degree of post-polio syndrome. Charmin warns, ignore the early signs, and the problems, the losses, could be much worse.
And not simply worse, but, you know, devastatingly worse.
So Charmin says the worst thing a polio survivor can do is to push themselves athletically. And she says, if you use it, then you'll lose it.
Is that right? That's the bitter irony, isn't this here, that exercise is the thing that made her, what, healthy, and now that's the very thing that's hurting her as well?
You know, she overcame polio and then in her 30s really became athletic and strong, and that's the very thing that probably pushed her over the edge here.
Do doctors know what caused all the symptoms?
The best theory is that when the polio was over, when the body began to rejuvenate itself, it sprouted secondary nerves that reattached to the muscle, and then after 20 to 40 years, they began to wear out. And now, especially for those people who use them a lot, people like Charmin who worked out a lot. Right,
like she said, she's really dynamic. And
you're watching KXLY News 4 at 5.
In our 5:30 difference, a federal report points a finger at the Navy in this year's mid-air collision between a Navy jet and a crop duster. The Federal Aviation Administration alleges the Navy was at fault. The report says the Navy pilot failed to yield and didn't make certain his craft was clear of the crop duster's plane before passing it. The two planes collided over a Palouse field in April. Crop duster Keith Graham was critically injured. A Navy crew member was seriously injured. The Navy will only say, quote, the Navy has not completed its review of the Navy investigation. Until that review is completed, it is inappropriate for us to comment on the issues associated with the mid-air collision, end quote. Neither the Navy nor the FAA report will have the final word. That decision rests with the National Transportation Safety Board.
North Idaho residents will mark a somber anniversary tomorrow. August 21st, 1992 was the day that a U.S. Marshal was killed on the mountaintop at Ruby Ridge. With William Deegan's death began a drama that many will not soon forget. Tanya Bendixson takes us back.
Supporters of Randy Weaver and Kevin Harris say justice may never be served. The shootout that killed Marshal William Deegan also took the life of Randy Weaver's son, Samuel. And as the standoff wore on, the Weaver family suffered another fatal blow.
Kevin is all right, but he did suffer a wound. Randy's in good health. Unfortunately, Vicky is dead.
Father, forgive them not, for they know what they do.
When Weaver and Harris finally surrendered, they would endure several months in prison, an 8-week-long trial, and finally exoneration.
I just want to thank the jury for everything.
Both Weaver and Harris were acquitted on murder and conspiracy charges. Even so, supporters say the government must somehow be held accountable for the deaths of Samuel and Vicky.
The mere fact that you're a marshal doesn't mean that you have a license to kill. The mere fact that you're an FBI man doesn't give you the license to kill innocent people. And something has to be done here. And then America has to be alerted to this. It's happening across the land. It has to stop.
Since his acquittal, Randy Weaver has remained in jail. He'll be sentenced on minor charges next month. Kevin Harris is back with his family. They say he's trying to get on with his life, trying to put the standoff on Ruby Ridge behind him. Tanya Bendixson, News 4.
Friends and supporters are planning a memorial and picnic to mark the anniversary of last year's confrontation, but neither Weaver nor Harris plan to attend.
Police are on the lookout for a man who they say used a knife to rob a Post Falls store today. Police say the man grabbed a worker at the Interstate Office Supply and held a knife to her throat. They say he demanded money and took off with nearly $200 in cash. The worker was not hurt. Police say the suspect is a white man with brown hair in his mid-20s, about 5'10" and 170 pounds. North Idaho authorities are warning people of a possible telephone fraud scheme. Victims say they've received calls from a person who claims to be from the phone company's security or a law enforcement agency. The caller asked for a phone credit card identification number for use in the investigation. The numbers are then used to charge unauthorized phone calls to the victim's phone number. Kootenai County Sheriff's Department says do not give out your PIN number over the phone. Ask the caller if you can call them back and then call the sheriff with that number. When you put on your hiking boots or biking helmet and take to a trail in the forest, have you ever wondered how it got there? It's not something many of us think about, but trails don't just magically appear. The average Forest Service trail takes a good 5 years from planning to use. Kim Reamland and photographer Brad Carlson take us into the Sandpoint District's corner of the Panhandle National Forest, where the woods are alive with activity.
In the woods just outside Sandpoint, construction is underway. But this time, it's not a new housing development or commercial endeavor. When finished, Gold Hill Trail will be 3.5 miles long.
Start knocking down that berm.
But users can expect the hike to take a while to finish.
You can't work with me then. We'll throw this brush right here.
Not because it's an especially difficult trail. One contributor to the back-aching work is a group hoping to use the trail the second it's done. The Grizzly Ridge Riders, a local mountain biking club.
There's a lot of development going on in this area, housing and so forth, and so a lot of local mountain bikers got together to help develop and save trails that we have in the area. This trail here, which we would call a single track, is sort of like what powder skiing would be to skiers. It's the best. It's real fun. It's like a roller coaster ride. We love it.
On Gold Hill Trail near Sandpoint, Kim Reamland, News 4, Positively Northwest.
Well, the trail is expected to open October 1st with construction underway. The Forest Service says it's still too dangerous for hiking now, but if you want to volunteer to help, give the Sandpoint Ranger District a call. So if you have a little vacation time to kill, just call them up. Go out. Put a trail through the forest.
Out there, yeah. Good. We'll see you tonight at 11.
Thanks, everyone.
Good
night.
Good night.